welcome to this episode of the Republic of Middle-Aged Men. You have your hosts as normal. You've got myself, Tim, and Lachlan.
Howdy.
And Ruben.
G'day.
Guys, you've got me to cave into peer pressure again. I've given the Kraken a go. I'm just cracking it open again.
Hey.
There's a dad joke for you. There's a dad joke for you. Pouring some into my nice little glass there. And I shan't speak like a pirate, but I can confirm it is very nice.
If you're going to speak like a pirate, you can save it for the nautical analogies.
That's cool. Yes, and maybe even do a shanty. What are you putting back there, Lachlan, with your drink?
And going back to a very old school favourite. It's a Jack Daniels and Coke. It's been a very long time, but
Wow.
it's just how I remember it.
Legit Coca-Cola?
Actually, funnily enough, I prefer Pepsi with Jack Daniels rather than Coke.
There you go.
Say
I
what
haven't
you
tried that combination. Have not tried it.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've had one, but yeah, quite nice for a change.
Hey, Timmy, do you usually put like a little earbud in or something? Because I'm getting an echo.
I do. I'll do that now while you tell us what you're drinking. I'll just change cameras.
Yeah, I had a mate come over and hang out for the first time in a while, and he left some beers in the fridge, so I'm finishing them off. It's a furphy.
That's clearly a good mate if he's leaving beers in your fridge.
Well, this particular mate, you would be tempted to think of him like Socrates, like he comes around and talks philosophy, but unlike Socrates, he brings his own drinks.
Nice.
Well,
Probably had shoes on as well, right?
Probably not the whole time. Definitely not the whole time, actually. Probably only for 5 minutes when I first arrived. So, hey, I've got a beard, I've got a belly, I enjoy good food and wine that I didn't make. There's lots of similarities.
Mate, if you start turning up to someone's house in a bed sheet, we'll know the conversion is complete.
That's not a bad idea.
Did someone say toga party?
Oh, yeah. All right.
I'm not sure what the implications of toga parties are, but I feel like it has to involve fondue.
I was thinking of Asterix and Obelix as well for some reason.
Well, you just gave me an idea, actually. I think when we do our face-to-face, perhaps we should wear togas.
Oh, wow. All right. Yeah.
I'm not sure if the internet's ready for that.
Look, I'm sure we can G-rate it a little bit. It's all good. So, excellent. Yeah. So, school's back this week. So, that's a bit exciting. My kids were both a bit anxious about that tonight. And I've fortunately been able to organise to drop them off in the morning to help them deal with that. But that's like 4 months at least for them of not going to school and seeing their friends face to face. So, it's a pretty big deal. How are you guys?
Yeah, all right. I mean, I actually had my one who's in year one. He went back last week. So we sort of did that sort of staggered return thing, which he was great and was quite excited about it. But at the same time, had gotten quite comfortable sort of being at home, liked being around the family unit and sort of having our thing. But he was quite all right. And then my eldest is going back tomorrow. He's super excited to see his mates, so not too apprehensive. He's just really keen to get there and see his friends and stuff again, so should be good.
Yeah, nice. How about yours, Rubes?
Yeah, I think it'll be good for the kids. My oldest doesn't give a crap. He's happy to stay at home, but my youngest is missed his mates. But they've been going 2 days a week anyway because of just the way I'm set up with essential workers and that. So it's not like a huge shock to their system.
Okay, that's good.
I'm just upset about the extra ironing.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll give you a secret. We don't iron in this house ever. So as soon as the clothes are washed, they get put on the clothes line on coat hangers, everything out, and we just let them dry that way.
Yeah,
And it works. There's no wrinkles. It's all good. I think part of it is the shirts that I buy are kind of friendly for that. They're not the like real cottony ones that
yeah, I know.
Need it.
yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things that we're about to go to Mars in a couple of years. We should be able to figure out how to make business shirts that don't need ironing.
I think it's pretty decent non-iron stuff these days, but I don't know. I used to wear a suit, tie, business shirt every day for work, and I haven't even done that for a while. Even when we were in the office, more recently, I think the workplace has gotten a heck of a lot more casual over the last few years. So, COVID's only amplified that, I reckon. So, I don't think too many people are going to be coming back wearing a tie. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
All right, well let's get into this week's reading. So, chapter 6, we're past halfway. Woo! Really enjoyed this week's reading. Doesn't feel it was heavy, but it's not like the last two books we've had to take 3 weeks each to get through them. And I know we still have half a book left, so might be opening our traps a little bit too soon. But it was refreshing to be able to get halfway through a chapter in 1 week, rather than a third of the way in and have your brain exploding. And I actually found this week that I wanted to, I was really in the zone reading it. Like, this is really interesting, and I couldn't wait to read the next bit. And I was even getting like a little bit frustrated that I had to pause just to underline things and write things down because I just wanted to keep going.
Nice.
Did you guys have a similar experience?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's super interesting. Just so, I think it's just because it was also like written in such a way that it was feeling very conversational. Whereas I know like last week we're looking at some like pretty out there sort of concepts and things like that you're sort of having to go back and like reread a couple of times to sort of make sense of what they're sort of saying. I think it just sort of had a bit of a logical flow to it. So it was a bit more, like you just wanted to keep reading. How about you, Rubes?
Yeah, I felt the same, but I think it's probably because they've sort of laid down the foundations, and we did the hard yards last week. So now they kind of just, when they're referring to things, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I know what he's talking about now. So it just flowed a lot better in that sense. Because so they basically, they sort of, at the start of book 6, they're still sort of talking about what a philosopher is, or something to that effect, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. They basically say, look, it looks like the true and false philosophers have been revealed, so we understand what they kind of look like. So then they ask the question, all right, so which one of those two classes are the ones that should be the rulers? Should it be the true philosopher or the false philosopher?
Yeah, that kind of seemed like a pretty obvious question, but he still asks it. It's right. The next question is this: if philosophers have the capacity to grasp the eternal and the immutable, while those who have no such capacity are not philosophers and are just lost in the multiplicity and change, which of the two should take charge of the state? To be quite honest, that seemed like a bit of a no-brainer to me.
Yep.
Yeah, agree. So, the way that he tries to argue that, though, rather than just going, well, it must be the true philosopher, and because that's what I am, rather than taking that approach, he decides to go through, well, what is the nature of the true philosopher?
Yes, that's right.
And start working through it.
I like where he kicks off from, even though he sort of says, well, there's something interesting in the fact that he says, he's talking about these forms, these realities, like we were talking about last week. And he's basically saying that that's the real reality. That's the most pure part of reality, over sort of uh, what he was referring to as multiplicity, which is kind of more like it's kind of like saying the ideas or these forms, these concepts are more real than the physical, which I thought it's interesting because that's sort of like his whole thing, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, but the reason he says that that's important is he says it's like, well, yeah, I'll just read it because obviously he's going to say it better than I do. Because they're referring to the people who don't think like philosophers being blind. And he says,
Yeah.
but surely blind is just how you would describe men who have no true knowledge of reality and no clear standard of perfection in their mind to which they can turn, as a painter turns to his model, and which they can study closely before they start laying down rules in the world about what is admirable and what is right or good, where such rules are needed or maintained as guardians, any that already exist. So basically, saying like if you don't have like a standard, like the philosophers are the ones that can see the purest form, like the purest truth. And he's like, so that's your standard. And if you don't have that standard, then what good are you? How can you be making rules about things when you don't know what the standards are?
Hmm.
That was how I read it, anyway.
Yeah, well, I think it links in with the stuff we were talking about last week, just around, do you have opinions or do you have knowledge? And, do you know the part or do you know the whole? And if you don't know the whole, then really you just have an opinion on one aspect.
Well, I think it's interesting because he's basically saying, look, if you've got nothing to aim at, then how are you
Hmm.
going to hit anything? Which I think kind of, because there's sort of this question hanging over the entire book. It's like his way of thinking is, I'm going to set up this hypothetical that's going to show you, and we're going to reason from that hypothetical, which seems a little odd these days. But having
Hmm.
said that, you can kind of see what he's doing when he says that, because it's like he's giving you an ideal or something to aim at, and we kind of look at that ideal and we're like, that's not going to work. It seems a bit ridiculous. That's not going to work in real life. But I think what this is kind of pointing towards is like, yeah, but here's your ideal, and it's
Hmm.
something to point at. So it almost validates the way that he's using like a hypotheticals as a technique of reason. So I thought that was interesting.
For sure.
Yeah, he's it's almost like a reverse Eden. Like he's trying to build a society before anything corrupts it.
Well, I think he's just
Oh yeah.
trying to build a society that you can avoid the corruption. Yeah. Um, it's well, we sort of talk on that a little bit further on, so we won't steal our own thunder.
Yeah, cool.
All right, so let's move on to the nature of the philosopher. So there's several things that he goes through here. So we'll start with that the philosopher loves knowledge. So that ties into what we are talking about last week too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, knowledge and truth, because he sort of intermingles truth and knowledge sort of back and forward. I think so.
Yeah, I found it really hard to differentiate the difference between when he was saying, truth and knowledge, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's a good point. Do you think though that one can understand knowledge but not be truthful? Maybe he's making that distinction that you can be a lover of knowledge, but you also are a lover of truthfulness.
oh
I don't
yeah,
think he's talking about necessarily maybe like the act of truth, but I think he's saying like knowledge is truth. It's the truth of the thing that you're trying to learn, rather than the opinion of a thing. If you know what I mean.
oh
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and I think that's why he sort of interchanges them a little bit, because like in his mind, it's, I think, separating the difference between what people call knowledge, which is opinion, versus actual knowledge, which is truth in his mind. I think that's how he's trying to explain it. Um, he sort of
yeah.
jumps between the two.
Yeah, okay.
I think, yeah, I mean, they've made it pretty clear with the noble lie that they don't always have to be truthful, but I think that's just the knowledge is truth if it's real knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point because one of the things he hits on is like, oh, that they're lovers of truth, and that was the
Mm.
first thing that came to mind. I was like, right, lovers of truth, eh? What about that noble lie you're banging on about a chapter or two back?
No, absolutely. Uh, I think as they're sort of like talking about sort of like the philosopher now, they start to sort of talk about, I think, like the forming of a philosopher, like from a like being a child or something like that, and they sort of talk about, from an early age that a philosopher will desire all truth, and if he desires truth as a strong desire, they question whether they'll be a bit weaker in some other desires or other attributes, I suppose.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Actually,
and
yeah, interestingly, he does kind of go on to raise something that they sort of haven't mentioned in their discussions of virtues prior. When he says, "You must see." Yeah, you're right, because he's picking out things that if you observe in someone, you know that they may not have a philosophic nature.
yeah.
And I might be skipping one here, but he says, "You must see it has no. You must see that the philosophic nature has no touch of meanness, pettiness of mind, is quite incompatible with the constant attempt to grasp the divine human being
Yeah.
as a whole in their entirety." So that's interesting because it hasn't. That's something that hasn't really come up before. Is this idea of meanness and pettiness is not consummate with a philosophic nature?
Yeah, I think that there was an interesting sort of way they put it in our text too. I think it was there should be no secret corner of illiberality. Nothing can be more antagonistic than meanness to a soul which is ever longing after the whole of things, both divine and human. Um, illiberal
Yeah,
was an
that's
interesting
heaps.
word too. I had to look
Yeah,
that one up.
I was going to say, yeah, that's heaps different from my translation. So, what did you come across when you're looking into illiberal?
Well, that's literally the opposite of liberal. So, principles restricting freedom of thought and behavior, anti democratic behavior. It's an
Mm.
interesting
Oh,
word. Might be able to
is it?
resurrect that one.
Yeah, I
Illiberal.
like it. So, is it they're equating that with meanness and pettiness of mind? Is that sort
Yeah.
of? Oh,
Mm.
okay. Yeah, I'm going to use that. Illiberal. That's going to be my word for the week.
So
It's always a good
is
one.
so illiberality is the word it's there. So I read that in my Western Sydney as illiberality.
Yeah.
um, is that right? Like,
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
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 that's right.
sweet. Okay, so illiberality.
Yeah,
So that's being illiberal.
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I was,
The,
I was,
the act of being a liberal. Yes.
I actually read that line at Ruben's place, and I was like, "What's that word?" And he goes, "Oh, mine says no touch of meanness or pettiness." I was like, "Okay," so I just
That doesn't help.
wrote that in my book.
Every time I come across something like, because every week when we do our reading, there's one or two that sort of jump out at me that I go, it's an unusual word I'm not familiar with. So,
Mm.
yeah, this is my homework.
Well, look, we're learning things. This is good.
I know. It is. It is. They start talking about true philosophers at this point in time who have a magnificence of mind and a spectator of all time and existence and what they'd
Yeah,
think
that's
of human life, and saying, well, no, they won't fear death, so they can't be a coward basically, because they see more than just life and death, I guess.
I'll read that paragraph. I'd be interested to hear what your translations sound like. But mine says, "And if a man has greatness of mind and a breadth of vision to contemplate all time and all reality, can he regard human life as a thing of any great consequence?"
Mm. That comes out very differently.
Yeah,
That sounds like human life doesn't really matter. But I
yeah,
think,
that's right. Because when I've read my book and I'm like, that sounds really. I don't know what the word for it is. Almost callous towards human
mm,
existence.
Mm.
But that's not the way it comes through on your translations.
I,
I'm trying to find the actual
when
passage, but
when I
I
read
must.
it, it made me think of that Bible quote where it says, "What is man that you would consider him?" I can't quite remember verbatim. I'm bad at that. Do you know the verse I mean, Ruben?
Oh, I'm not sure, but the one that it made me think of the life is but a vapor.
Yeah, no, there's that other one that "What is man that you would consider him?" or something like that. It's like when I look at the heavens, or I'll have
Sounds
to
like
look it
Job.
up. I'll have to look it up. It might be. Um,
Might be from the end of Job,
what do you
if
think?
I had to guess.
What you tell me what you think, Lachlan, while I find that verse.
Look, I actually sort of thought it sounded a little bit like how Rubes was saying it, but I guess it was only when they sort of drew that connection to them about not being a coward that I was like, oh, okay, I
That's what
think
they're
there's a
getting
different.
at.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the way I
I must
thought
admit,
too.
yeah.
But I'm just curious, like if that's what it takes to not be a coward, is
Mm.
there a sort of a dark side to that? You know, I don't think he means it that way, but is that it might be a necessary side effect to that kind of thinking. Like if you really are just considering these big great cosmic things and everything else becomes less important, are you
Yeah.
going to step on people? I mean, Plato. I mean, Socrates has already said, if you can't fulfill your role in society, maybe you're better off just dying. So is this rearing its ugly head again?
Yeah, look, you could be right. I mean, I can sort of see the full quote there, and look, I'd already sort of paraphrased it pretty closely anyway. But and then how can he, who has a magnificence of mind and is a spectator of all time and all existence, think much of human life?
Yeah,
He
because one of
cannot.
the criticisms of ideologues or ideology or philosophy in the modern times is that, like, it comes up with these grand ideas like utopia or
Mm.
utopianism. So it's got this really grand scale thing to aim at, but then in the process of getting there, it will willingly tread on people. So I don't know whether maybe I'm being a little bit uncharitable to old Socrates, but that's just where my mind went when I read that passage.
I got
Well,
the same vibe, but I think they were talking about more about fear of their own mortality, maybe,
that's
Yeah,
rather
right.
than
yeah.
Yeah.
that of others. Yeah.
No, I think that's right. The verse I was thinking of, by the way, is Psalm chapter 8, verse 4. Um, so it's what is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them. Um, it's because God is eternal. That so it's that same idea because God's eternal and across everything. Like, what is man in regards, like in relation to that, this massive thing. I think it's a really, it just felt really familiar for me. I know it's not related, but I think the two, I think it is linked in that the idea is that when you have a viewpoint that is, well, for lack of a better term, eternal, then what is the significance of a human life?
Hmm.
I think both of those things are saying a similar idea, and I've
I
heard
think
modern
you're.
day people say that same thing. Like I've heard, um, what's his name, Brian Cox, Professor Brian Cox, talk about that, and that the other one, the Neil deGrasse Tyson,
Mm-hmm.
on his what was that documentary they did 5 years ago or so? Well, not documentary,
Yeah, I
radio
know the
show.
one you mean.
Yeah, uh, Cosmos. On Cosmos, they talk about that a bit, and they get like I think it's a calendar on the screen, and they show that the entirety of human existence fits into like a ridiculously small amount of time. What is it, 3 minutes or a couple of seconds, something like that? So it's just that argument of when time is so big, we're so little. But I think you're right
No,
though, Lachlan. I think it's a thing about not being a coward as opposed to having no care for anybody else.
but I think you're right though. I think it's necessarily linked because even if at the start of chapter 6, when he's talking about a philosopher, he's saying they have the capacity to grasp eternal and immutable truths. So I think there's necessarily an idea of almost infinity in that. Like it's a really big thing, something that's almost beyond comprehension.
Yeah,
Anyway, interesting.
it
For
definitely is
sure.
interesting.
So after I guess they talk about the sort of the fact that they won't be a coward, I guess they're sort of talking about how they can sort of separate the like who's of a philosophical nature from an unphilosophical. So there's a short quote. I might as well read that one and just kind of give the gist of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
hit it up.
again, can he who is harmoniously constituted, who is not covetous or mean or a boaster or a coward, can he, I say, ever be unjust or harden his dealings? impossible. Then we will soon observe whether a man is just and gentle or rude and unsociable. And these are the signs that will distinguish, even in youth, the philosophical nature from the unphilosophical. So I guess he's just putting the seal on the deal there.
Yeah. I think he throws in there they need to be quick at learning and have a good memory, which I think that's all pretty fair. That's almost kind of obvious. Although I did notice when he's talking about someone who's not quick at. I had a joke about this with Timmy too. He said if somebody's not quick at learning, so he'll labour in vain, and in the end be driven to hate himself and the whole business of learning. And I'm like, that kind of sounds like he's describing ADD.
I love how they keep referring to this. Will he not be an empty vessel? It's like you're an empty head. Isn't there a quote about the emptiest vessels are the loudest or something like that? I'm sure that's a philosophical quote. I'll have to find that too.
No, I had to have a bit of a chuckle at that one though, where they're talking about the empty vessels. Basically, it's not that you're dumb, but you've just got a bad memory. And I was like, that's me. Like, I'd be out. There's no way I could be a philosopher. I can't remember anything. I'm hopeless.
Yeah, we obviously wouldn't tick the boxes for this bloke that's leading the country. Not that I'd want to, but yeah.
That's all right. The US president couldn't remember his name either, so that's all right. It's our mate from down under. Because I can't remember his name.
There's apparently it's actually a Plato quote. So, as empty vessels make the loudest sound, so they that have the least wit are the greatest blubbers.
Nice.
That's not bad.
Nice.
That's not bad at all.
Good quote. All right, so let's keep going. There's plenty to get through tonight. So, you don't want to be an empty head, and they must have a good memory, and so then they say, so besides other qualities, we must try to find a naturally well-proportioned and gracious mind, which will move spontaneously toward the true being of everything.
Yeah.
So they agree. So this is where they move on again. So they're saying, okay, so here's the summary of everything they've just talked about. So let's just continue reading for what I left there. So it goes, and do not all these qualities which we have been enumerating go together? And are they not in a manner necessary to a soul which is to have a full and perfect participation of being? They are absolutely necessary, he replied. And must not that be a blameless study, which he only can pursue who has the gift of a good memory, and is quick to learn, noble, gracious, the friend of truth, justice, courage, temperance, who are his kindred? The god of jealousy himself, he said, could find no fault with such a study. And to men like him, I said, when perfected by years and education, and to these only you will entrust the state.
I think my version's better for the first time.
Oh, okay. Read away.
He says, Momus himself could find no fault there. So apparently that's the god of, what was it, the god of jealousy?
Momness. How's it spelled? Momus.
M-O-M-U-S.
Yeah, I like it with a bit of paprika on the top, my momus. It's great.
Yeah, so you're right. They kind of wrap it up and say, yeah, that's your dude.
I just googled Momus. Apparently, it's a Scottish songwriter whose name is Nicholas Nick Curry, born the 11th of February 1960, more popularly known under the artist name Momus. He's a weird looking dude.
He was tapping into the Oracle of Delphi, who could see to the future, Tim, to be able to identify him.
He actually has an eye patch, and he looks like the actor who plays Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. He looks a bit like that dude.
Funny.
Weird.
Well, I guess
anyway.
I might listen to some Momus after the podcast.
Yes, we'll have to do that. If it's any good, I'll put it in the description link.
So now we get the big interjection.
Yeah, Adamantis is
Oh
back
yeah,
at it.
yep. They wake up. They're like, "Hang on."
Yeah, stepping up to the plate. So do you want
who
to read
wants
this
to
one,
re-
Tim? Or?
Oh, sure, I can do that. Okay. Here Adamantius. What is this, Wolverine? Adamantium. Here Adamantius imposed and said, "To these statements, Socrates, no one can offer a reply. But when you talk in this way, a strange feeling passes over the minds of your hearers. They fancy that they are led astray a little at each step in the argument, owing to their own want of skill in asking and answering questions. These littles accumulate, and at the end of the discussion they are found to have sustained a mighty overthrow, and all their former notions appear to be turned upside down. And as unskilful players of draughts are at last shut up by their more skilful adversaries, and have no peace to move, so they too find themselves shut up at last. For they have nothing to say in this new game of which words are the counters. And yet all the time they are in the right. The observation is suggested to me by what is now occurring. For any one of us might say that although in words he is not able to meet you at each step of the argument, he sees a fact that the votaries of philosophy, when they carry on the study, not only in youth as a part of education, but as the pursuit of their maturer years, most of them become strange monsters, not to say utter rogues, and that those who may be considered the best of them are made useless to the world by the very study which you extol."
That's gold. He just nails him.
Yeah.
So what's he saying in layman's terms?
Socrates, you're getting us to agree to all this like little offshoot stuff. And then like you get one agreement there, and then you roll on to the next one. You get an agreement there, roll on to the next one. And we've suddenly agreed to something way down the track that we had no intention to agreeing to, just because you led us through this little garden path.
It's exactly what he does, though, isn't it?
It is.
100%.
Totally is. Yeah.
But then he goes, and the thing that we all know is that philosophers end up growing up to be the men from Gonna Do. Yeah, they don't do anything.
Yeah, he does. He basically says there's like a pretty broad societal opinion that you guys are pretty much useless or malicious.
Yeah.
The really
Because
funny
my
thing is,
version says, I actually like my version on this one. He says most of them become very odd birds, not to say thoroughly vicious.
and you can kind of understand why. I must admit, when I was first reading this, I thought it just must mean that they're so caught up with their own thoughts that they just don't have a touch of reality, and they just got their head in the clouds, too highfalutin and not down to earth and all that sort of thing. But as we read on, we sort of uncover a bit more, and surprisingly, Socrates agrees with him, which was a plot twist I wasn't expecting.
I actually think what's about to come, I feel like this is the first time in the book where Socrates is really really coming out. He's coming out of the closet. Socrates is coming out of the closet on this. And he's
that's not a toga, that's a dress. Yeah.
He's like, no, he's basically comes and goes, this is how I really feel about this stuff. I feel like what comes from this is very, very, very flowing. They're not dragging it out of him at this point. He really starts to fire up, which is good. And he goes, yeah, that's right. This is kind of funny. He just goes, oh, the answer to that question, I said, I must give you an illustration. And Adamantis' response to that is priceless, because Socrates is like, well, let me give you another analogy. And then Adamantis says, and I'll let you read your sections because I think your sections sound better.
Yes, Socrates. And that is a way of speaking to which you are not at all accustomed, I suppose.
Yeah, he's basically like, here we go. another analogy. You haven't done this before.
That's all you do, Socrates. That's all you do.
But the sarcasm is very thick.
Yeah, for sure. They've got to appreciate that in this book. It is entertaining to read.
Well,
It,
yeah,
it really
I was on
is.
board though. I was on board. I was
Yeah.
like, he's right, Socrates. What are you going to do? And then typically he does. He gives an analogy, and then you kind of start to go, "Oh, hang on, he's not as dumb as he sounds."
I love the fact that he starts to set the scene before he even tells the parable, though, and saying that in order to show the outcomes, we need to, make some unlikely imaginations, and talks of fabulous unions of goats and stags as seen in the pictures. Okay, oh my
That's right.
God, what are we about to uncover here?
It's pretty good. But then I think it's time for me to get my drink out again.
Oh, there you
That's
go.
right. We're about to hit the nautical analogy. So,
yeah,
crack out the Kraken rum.
I'm going to get out my Kraken rum. And let's get ready for the sea shanty argument. No, it's not a sea shanty argument, but the argument around what would you call it? The incompetent captain and his crew?
Yeah, that's not bad.
More or less, yeah.
All right, let's dig in.
Yeah, so I guess I haven't got the full quote here, but I'll just sort of talk through it, I guess. So basically, they're talking about an example of where you could have like a ship's captain, and he's stronger and taller than all the crew, but in our version, he's sort of talking about him being a little blind and deaf, and that he's actually not that great a navigator, which is kind of the prime function for the captain, right? And since he's a weak navigator, all the crew are arguing about how and where they need to steer, but none of them are equipped with the knowledge of navigation. And more or less, the crew mutinies, drugs the captain, kill each other if they disagree with each other, take possession of the stores, and basically go to town, just going wild. And the sailors who help in the mutiny are held in high esteem by the mutineers. And I think that's just a bit of foreshadowing, planting a seed there in that little example.
Yeah.
And more or less, I think they're sort of saying is like the pilot or the captain, they need to pay attention to their art to be able to guide the ship, and not any old sailor can do it. But when you're looking at the ship in a state of mutiny, how would they regard the pilot? How would they regard the captain? And I think they said something along the lines of they'd be regarded as a stargazing prat, which I thought was just hilarious.
That's right. So they're basically
Stargazing
saying
brat.
if there was like one dude on this ship who actually knew about navigation and was studying the stars and the seasons and everything he needs to do to know which direction to go, they would just look at him and basically go, "Nerd."
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, they got no idea. But
Yeah. So to break down the analogy, from what I can tell, the captain in this analogy is like current leadership, because he's bigger and he's stronger, and that's the only reason he leads. He doesn't really know what he's doing, and as he gets old and weaker, someone's going to take over. And they're basically saying that the people that are going to take over aren't any better than the bloke that was already in charge. And I think in this analogy, the knowledge of navigation is philosophy.
for sure.
Like that's yeah. So and he's saying so that the old boss didn't really know anything. So the new people that are going to take over by force, they don't really know anything. They don't know any better. And then the one bloke who's actually knows something, he's just going to get ridden off because they're not going to want to give over power to him. They've just done all this drugging and fighting to get to the top. Is that roughly what he's saying?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he's also sowing the seed for the sophist sort of argument that's to come as well.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
which is funny because it's funny because Adamandus has just said, no, don't do this stuff where you get us to agree to one little thing and then the next and the next. And what he instantly does is get him to agree to one little thing, which he's going to build on later.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's glorious.
Yeah.
But I think you're right about the sophist. Like he's saying that the captain isn't like great at that craft.
Yep.
And so I think you're right. But I think he's also demonstrating that if a true craftsman came along, they'll be put in the same category as the sophist that's already been overthrown, and so the whole society is like, or the whole crew rather, is like it
Hopeless.
doesn't matter if they prescribe to that, then they're just a waste of time, like the old guy was.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was also that part about the people who helped with the mutiny, who are basically ignorant, are being held up in high esteem, and I think that's sort of the argument for the sophists as well, because it's like basically you're a bunch of monkeys just agreeing with popular opinion here, and you're all patting each other on the back, but you're a pack of idiots. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, he's being a bit more subtle about it, but I think that's what he's kind of getting at.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
So
so I guess if you really had to boil it down, what he's saying is, well, you're saying that philosophers are useless and people don't like them, and he's saying, well, how can you say that? Essentially, how can you say they're useless if nobody's listening to them?
yep. Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's the thing about the stargazing Pratt thing as well, because like he's saying, like that's how you guys look at us philosophers, and you don't understand the value that we can give you guys, and because you don't understand the work and the skill and the effort that we sort of put into these things, our skills aren't understood, so you don't value
Yeah, and
us.
you haven't even bothered listening to us. So what's the point?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually read that quote because it's quite short, and I think he nails it. So he goes,
Yep.
so after he goes, to be called a prater, a stargazer, a good for nothing. Of course, said Adamantus. Then you will hardly need, I said, to hear the interpretation of the figure which describes the true philosopher in his relation to the state, for you understand already, certainly. Then suppose you now take this parable to the gentleman who is surprised at finding that philosophers have no honour in their cities. Explain it to him and try to convince him that their having honour would be far more extraordinary. So I will. So yeah, he's saying apply this principle to that of the philosopher. That's pretty obvious. The answer's there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and Adamantus just agrees. I think, and Adamantus seems to be happy. He's like, oh, okay, so you've now given me an argument that I can bring to the people that say this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think. I mean, look, he's always pretty. He's always looking to be satisfied, right? Because he agrees
Yeah.
with Socrates, and he's looking for those reasons to hold it up. So it makes a lot of sense there. Yeah, there was some other same to the quote that you had there, Tim. For these reasons, among men like these, philosophy, the noblest pursuit of all, is not likely to be much esteemed by those of the opposite faction. Not that the greatest and most lasting injury is done to her by opponents, but by her own professing followers, the same of whom you suppose the accuser to say that the greater number of them are arrogant rogues and the best are useless, in which opinion I agreed.
So then he goes, yes. So, and the reason why the good are useless has now been explained. True.
That's it.
Then shall we proceed to show that the corruption of the majority is also unavoidable, and that this is not to be laid to the charge of philosophy any more than the other, by all means. So this is now where I think he blames society.
Yeah,
Kinda.
more or less.
That's right, because he goes on to kind of say, all right, so we've established that part of the problem is that, well, you're saying they're useless, but nobody listens to them, so how would you know? And then he goes, but what of, but he goes to say the ones that are actually bad. Let's explore why it is that they're bad philosophers. Like, why are they so useless in society? Why do they become, was it errant rogues? My book, I think, or one of the translations said.
Yeah.
Yes, it does say errant rogues. There's another saying we need to bring back. What an errant? What is it?
Errant? I think
errant.
I think
what
errant
an
means
errant
error.
road. Errant rogue. Okay.
Yeah, I think more or less they're sort of pointing out now that I think life and society as it exists now makes it very difficult for philosophers to really remain true to the cause, I guess. And they're talking about, I suppose, like the pressures and distractions of society. So there's a little quote that I had there. Then there are all the ordinary goods of life: beauty, wealth, strength, rank, and great connections in the state. You understand this sort of things? These also have a corrupting and distracting effect. Um, and you can sort of say that he's basically sort of saying that you know great minds at this point in time are capable of good or evil, and I suppose it's a matter of education around like how you can try and sort of steer them. But society and the wants in the society make it really hard to stay the course.
Yeah, you're right, and I'm just trying to see how else it explains that. But it's kind of saying that if they've got the skill set of a philosopher, then they're probably going to get distracted at some time anyway, because they'll get put in the limelight, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're sort of saying like I think like young philosophers as they're sort of being educated even can be picked upon, like particularly there's something there about them being, if they've got a keen mind but also of like good body, and I think they're meaning like just an attractive fellow or whatever as well, and people are going to identify them and sort of say, you know what, you're probably like a future leader, you're really switched on and all this sort of thing. And so they get kind of pulled into this situation, I guess, where there's other people who are trying to, encourage them and, pay them lots of compliments and things like that, inflate their egos for their own gain because they want to keep that person on side and kind of influencing them to their own sort of means. And so I think they're really just trying to set the scene that it's really hard, I think, for a philosopher not to become sort of inflated with their own self-importance if they're surrounded by important people who are pumping up their ego and telling them what they want to hear. And they, may well wind up sort of like effectively becoming something that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, basically designing what their philosophy is around the applause of the audience.
Yeah, I mean, they specifically sort of talk to that, thing. He talks about like the poisoning of their societies by the sophists, and that it's hard to resist the lure of public opinion. He does sort of have an example there about having a young man at they give like it could be a few different sort of things, but whether it's a play or a speech or something like that, and it's hard to maintain the voice of reason when you've got this crowd or booing or cheering or whatever for something that you don't believe in, but you could have your heart swayed because the mass around you and everyone's making this noise, and it's basically saying that it's really hard to resist for a young person.
Yeah, I think he uses the analogy of a seed as well, doesn't he, to describe the young philosopher. I'm just trying to find that quote.
Yeah,
yeah, here it is. Sorry, were you going to read something, Ruben?
Oh, I was going to read the bit where he describes the crowd. He's pretty unflattering.
Go for it.
When they come to popular meetings, with a great deal of noise and a great lack of moderation, shout and clap their approval or disapproval to whatever is purpose or done, till the rocks of the whole place re-echo, and redouble the noise of their boots and applause. Can a young man's heart remain unmoved by all of this?
Yeah, you can totally see that too. Because a young person would be filled with a bit of like self-doubt. Everyone else thinks it's this. I think it's something else, but maybe I'm wrong.
A bit of peer pressure.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll go on to the seed quote because I think it's good too, if you guys don't mind.
Sure, go for it.
So it says, we all know that germs or seeds, whether vegetable or animal, when they fail to meet with proper nutriment or climate or soil in proportion to their vigour, are all the more sensitive to the want of a suitable environment, for evil is a greater enemy to what is good than what is not. He goes, very true. There is reason in supposing that the finest natures, when under alien conditions, receive more injury than the inferior, because the contrast is greater, certainly. And may we not say, Adamentus, that the most gifted minds, when they are ill-educated, become preeminently bad? Do not great crimes in the spirit of pure evil spring out of a fullness of nature ruined by education, rather than from any inferiority, whereas weak natures are scarcely capable of any very great good or very great evil? There, I think you are right.
Yeah, so I think he's just sort of saying that those highly intelligent people are capable of the very best and the very worst, and it's incumbent on that education to try and make sure they're on the path to good. Whereas someone who's of a simpler mind, whether they're good or evil, is probably not going to have the bigger impact because they're not going to. It's just a different sort of scale, I guess they're sort of saying there.
Yeah. I think after that he goes on to say, and then on top of that, you've got the punishment, disenfranchisement, fines, or death, which these educational experts inflict on those who won't listen to them, imposing sanctions where persuasion has failed. So he's saying that on top of this peer pressure, you've then got people who are teaching them, and you can't disagree with them because there's consequences for disagreeing with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was another wacky word in here that I pulled out. This was the threat of attainder, which I'd never heard of before.
Oh.
So attainder is a historical word for the forfeiture of lands and civil rights suffered as a consequence of a sentence of death for treason or felony.
Well, so there you go.
Okay.
So pretty heavy. So seize your lands, take your wealth, take away your title or respect. So he's talking about the coercion by the sophists and I suppose
you would
government
assume the ruling classes.
Yeah.
Well, that's very true. I mean, it's true. I mean, if you go against the grain of what the popular opinion is, there's going to be consequences, and some of those are going to be legal.
Yeah, and he sort of says, now what opinion of any other sophist or any other private person can be expected to overcome in such an unequal contest? None, he replies. So they all agree that you can't really. It's hard to beat that situation.
Yeah, he says anything short of a miracle, you would say.
Right. No, indeed, I said, even to make the attempt is a great piece of folly. There neither is, nor has been, nor is ever likely to be any different type of character which has had no other training in virtue, but that which is supplied by public opinion. I speak, my friend, of human virtue only. What is more than human, as a proverb says, is not included. For I would not have you ignorant that in the present evil state of governments, whatever is saved and comes to good is saved by the power of God, as we may truly say. Pretty powerful statement there.
Yeah, he's pretty he's pretty damning towards whatever the setup was in his days, the governments that were around in his time. He's pretty negative towards them. He's basically saying anything that's good that comes out of them is really by a blessing of blessings of God. Because it's got nothing to do with them or their talents, because they're pretty rotten.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to think that's a pretty scandalous statement for him to just sort of roll out, particularly in the company that they're holding right there. Because if you remember, some of the earlier statement he sort of said about, that philosophers should be the leaders, and basically the people who are in there aren't fit for it. And Adamant is like, whoa, dude, you can't just go and drop those bombs in here. So I think this would have been just as spicy, to be honest.
Well, it's exactly what he says will happen. So he goes, basically philosophers must inevitably fall under the censure of the world. And then later, he goes, and even if there be someone who, through inherent goodness or natural reasonableness, had his eyes open a little and is humbled and taken captive by philosophy, how will his friends behave when they think that they are likely to lose the advantage which they were hoping to reap from his companionship? Will they not do and say anything to prevent him from yielding to his better nature and to render his teacher powerless, using to this end private intrigues as well as public prosecutions? There can be no doubt about it. And it goes, and how can one who is thus circumstanced ever become a philosopher? It's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that before or after the bit where they do where he's got the analogy of feeding a beast?
It's after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we may as well talk about the beast then.
Let's talk about the beast, and then we can talk about the bald little tinker. So I've driven over to you for the beast.
Yeah. So just before what Tim was pointing out, they're talking because they just got off talking about, well, there's all this societal influence, and the teachers are going to teach them wrong, and there's going to be repercussions if you don't learn right from them. He kind of almost makes an apology for these sophists in the sense that it's not really an apology. It's kind of a bit of both. He's kind of essentially saying this is the way they behave, and they're behaving this way because of the way that society is structured. But it's also not a particularly flattering way to describe them. Essentially, what he's saying is, it's like you've got a man and he has a powerful beast, and he's studying this beast, and he's studying its moods, and he's feeding it, and he's looking after it, and he knows what will make it, savage or make it gentle. So his behavior then adapts to keep this beast happy, essentially. And what he's saying is, that's kind of what these teachers end up doing, because you've got these masses of people that think a certain way. So they'll end up just teaching what is going to keep them happy and keep them placated, rather than what is true, which is essentially his definition of what a sophist is. They're saying what people want to hear, or what will make them money, or what will keep the beast calm, rather than teaching people what is actually true.
And then label that technique as wisdom, which I thought was a good little bit at the end. And yeah, I mean, is that how he feels about animal husbandry? Like in the earlier chapters about, is that why he doesn't like people calling breeding horses wisdom?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. It's a great analogy, though. It is spot on.
Well,
I think it's,
I don't know whether I don't know whether it's kind of reading. I don't know whether it's kind of. Sorry, mate. I don't know whether it's kind of reading too much into it. But when he's talking about the crowds and the masses, and they just get ginned up, and they just express their disapproval with loud anger, and then you combine that with what he's talking about here, about the type of people who are going to teach, and assumedly the sophists are the kind of people who are trying to teach leaders. It's almost starting to add up to me as kind of like a negative critique of democracy.
I thought he was talking about Twitter.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's true. Like, if you're going to go on Twitter, I don't use Twitter, but if you're going to go on Twitter and you want to be popular, what kind of stuff are you going to post? You're going to post things that are popular, and get you those hits.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just placating the beast. You're feeding the beast.
So by Socrates' definition, our show about philosophy being successful should mean that no one watches it, or very, very, very few people do. So maybe we are doing philosophy correctly.
I thought we established that our memories, we're not quick enough at learning, and our memories are not good enough to be philosophers.
That's true. Well, I just found there was a good quote in that section. I might just read out if that's all right, Rubes.
Yeah, go for it.
It's saying, like when they're talking about the beast, good he pronounces to be that in which the beast delights, and evil to be that which he dislikes. And he can give no other account of them except that they are just and noble, are the necessary. Having never himself seen, and having no power of explaining to others the nature of either, or the difference between them, which is immense. And so he's just basically sort of saying, like, you know what to do to make this thing happy or to make it, unhappy, but you have no idea why that's happening or should it happen. You're not asking any questions about it. All you're doing is parroting a learned behavior, and you have no real knowledge. It's
Mm.
like teaching a monkey to press buttons and learning that if they press the right button, they get food.
Yeah,
Um,
that kind of
Yeah.
goes back into what they were saying earlier about the difference between opinion and knowledge. He's saying
mm,
he's saying yeah, they're just looking at instances and applying what works rather than looking what is actually true and what the ultimate reality is.
yeah, it's just behavioral. It's not knowledge at all. It's almost like a you could act on reflex without thinking about something. It's like you could watch someone's face and tell if they are accepting it or not, and then just change your diatribe a little bit to suit it in order to sort of get where you want to be. Um, yeah, yeah. That just don't have that why, and I think that's obviously what philosophy is about is the why and what is it about that thing, and it's obviously like a very basic skill. You know, I think is what he's comparing the sophist operation to, and that it's not a sign of great intelligence of a human. The fact that you can learn how to manipulate the system just based on some of those behavioral things, I think he's being pretty scathing towards the sophists there.
Yeah, and he
Yeah,
uses
yeah,
this is where he uses the next analogy to describe the sophists, I think. Uh, because he goes, and so philosophy is left desolate with her marriage rite incomplete, for her own have fallen away and forsaken her, and while they are leading a false and unbecoming life, other unworthy persons, seeing that she has no kinsmen to be her protectors, enter in and dishonour her, and fasten upon her the reproaches which, as you say, her reprovers utter, who affirm of her votaries that some are good for nothing, and that the greater number deserve the severest punishment. That is certainly what people say. So I'll just keep reading because they say it better than I ever can. Yes, and what else would you expect, I said, when you think of the puny creatures who, seeing this land open to them, a land well stocked with fair names and showy titles, like prisoners running out of a prison into a sanctuary, take a leap out of their trades into philosophy. Those who do so being probably the cleverest hands at their own miserable crafts. For although philosophy be in this evil case, still there remains a dignity about her which is not to be found in the arts, and many are thus attracted by her whose natures are imperfect, and whose souls are maimed and disfigured by their meanness, as their bodies are by their trades and crafts. Is not this unavoidable? Yes. Are they not exactly like a bored little tinker who has just got out of durance and come into fortune? He takes a bath and puts on a new coat, and is decked out as a bridegroom going to marry his master's daughter, who is left poor and desolate. A most exact parallel. What will be the issue of such marriages? Will they not be vile and bastard? There can be no question of it. So yeah,
Yep.
I think it's a great example there.
Yeah, and he's going back to that whole thing too about talking about like people need to do the job that they're best suited to in society, and that's sort of part of that thing he was sort of talking about with their fictional state. When you've got people and they're moving between classes and functions and not doing the one that they should be doing, I think he was thinking about this sort of thing the whole time when he was talking about that
yeah,
earlier.
yeah. You're right. I didn't pick up on that. I think you're dead right.
Well, he comes to the conclusion, which is, and when persons who are unworthy of education approach philosophy and make an alliance with her who is a rank above them, what sort of ideas and opinions are likely to be generated? Will they not be sophisms captivating to the ear, having nothing in them genuine or worthy of or akin to true wisdom? No doubt.
Yeah, you're just going to to lean on popular opinion and tell people what they want to hear and get lots of cheers, hopefully make some money, get some credit and clicks on your on your tweets, and
Yeah, so you reckon that's why Socrates is so hard up on saying, you get your class and you stick to it?
I think that's part of it. And I don't think it's like protectionism for him. I think he'd be quite happy to have lots of philosophers, um, so long as you're up to the task and are going to do it properly. Um, if you're making pottery last week and you just want to be a superstar of philosophy, then it's not for you, buddy. Off you trot.
It's interesting because as a person that is not a philosopher by trade, I read this and think, does that mean I should stop reading this book? Am I in the wrong place here?
Maybe we should just
only if you quit your job to become a philosopher. I think that's the demarcation.
But wouldn't he argue that would even make me an even worse sophist because I'm not even a full-time sophist, I'm a casual sophist?
I think it's fine. I reckon he's probably like, you're fine. It's good to study it, right? Because they say that like that should be part of all education, right? Whether you become a philosopher or not. And so I think this is just part of your education, Tim. So it's okay.
So hang on. So it's acceptable for everyone to be a student, but only the right people can be the teacher. Is that essentially what he's saying?
A full-time philosopher, yeah.
I think, if that's going to be your calling, then you have to hit the total attributes to become that sort of function.
Interesting. Well, what is the total attributes of the function? That leads to this next 3/4 of a page, which I don't know if those of you only listening, on my book, I'm holding it up to camera poorly because I'm useless at knowing where my page is. There it is. And I've just highlighted down the side and written the word wow. Because it's fantastic. I think you've got the same things highlighted, guys. Do you want me to read it, or do one of you want to read it?
This is the then Adamantus, I said.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah, I'll give it a crack if you like.
All right, rock and roll. Here we go.
Right.
Oh, before I interrupt you, will you finish with as well of himself?
No.
Oh, okay. Are you finishing beyond that or before that?
Before that.
Oh, I think we should go to there. Are you happy to go to there?
I don't have that full quote in front of me because
well, you go to where you were up to, and then I'll continue.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do a tag.
Two part. All right, go.
Yep. Okay. Then Adamantus, I said, the worthy disciple of philosophy will be but a small remnant, perchance some noble and well-educated person, detained by exile in her service, who in the absence of corrupting influences remains devoted to her. Or some lofty soul born in a mean city, the politics of which he contemns and neglects, and there may be a gifted few who leave the arts, which they justly despise, and come to her. Or peradventure there are some who are restrained by our friend Theages' bridle, for everything in the life of Theages conspired to divert him from philosophy, but ill health kept him away from politics. My own case of the internal sign is hardly worth mentioning, for rarely, if ever, has such a monitor been given to any other man. Those who belong to this small class have tasted how sweet and blessed a possession philosophy is, and have also seen enough of madness of the multitude that they know that no politician is honest, nor is there any champion of justice at whose sides they may fight and be saved. Such a one may be compared to a man who has fallen among wild beasts. He will not join in the wickedness of his fellows, but neither is he able singly to resist all their fierce natures. And therefore, seeing that he would be of no use to the state or to his friends, and reflecting that he would have to throw away his life without doing any good either to himself or others, he holds his peace and goes his own way. He is like one who, in the storm of dust and sleet, which the driving wind hurries along, retires under the shelter of a wall. And seeing the rest of mankind full of wickedness, he is content, if only he can live his own life and be pure from evil or unrighteousness, and depart in peace and goodwill with bright hopes. Over to you, Tim.
Yes, he said, and he will have done a great work before he departs. A great work, yes, but not the greatest, unless he finds a state suitable to him. For in a state which is suitable to him, he will have a larger growth and be the saviour of his country as well as of himself. So that's where I wanted to finish that one. I think it's that's an amazing piece of writing right there.
For sure. This is a bit. Rubes were texting on it on Saturday, and I was saying I felt bad for Socrates after that because I just felt his frustration at the society that they live in and at the fact that he cares so much about philosophy and just can't kind of. I think he feels like he can't make enough difference. He's sort of trying, but feels like he's sort of pissing in the wind, I guess.
Yeah, he just sees it as being misused and abused, and then he contemplates sort of whether what else can I do, and then he realizes it's all futile. All I'm going to do is hurt myself and not make any good difference to others.
Yeah.
And that's right. He describes that person as just going and sitting under a wall and just watching the world burn, basically.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I actually really feel for the
guy. Lachlan did. My response to that was, "Nah, dude, that's not why people don't like you. It's because you don't shower and you don't wear shoes. That's why you're sitting under the wall over there." I was joking, obviously, but
maybe they need to make a deodorant brand for philosophers.
It is pretty moving, though. I agree with you. Like it's very interesting. The more cynical side of me is tempted to listen to that and just go, yeah, all right, settle down. You think you can solve all the world's problems and they won't listen to you. How about maybe you're just not as smart as you think you are and you can't solve all the world problems? But no, I can certainly see where he's coming from. Do you think, Tim, I know you're a big fan of Stoicism, that little line at the end where he goes, finally they'll just kind of sit there and they'll take their leave and with they'll sit there just with cheerful composure and good hope. Do you think that's kind of almost pointing towards Stoicism, like just accepting that you're not going to make the difference you want, but just to live the life that you want to and do the right thing and leave the rest to fate?
I think that's the conclusion of Stoicism. Is that, well, not maybe the conclusion, but it's a conclusion of Stoicism that you can only control your thoughts. They pretty much acknowledge that you can't control even the body, really, but they believe that you have control of the soul, and that's why they're big on controlling your response and the way that you perceive things determines your reality. I think they weren't the guys to come up with that, but I think they prescribe to that impressions model, that it's your impressions of events that determine how much you suffer. So yeah, I think they align with that for sure.
But Adamantis does then go on to say, if they do live that way, that's no small achievement.
Yeah.
So he's like, even doing that can't be easy.
I read all this and I still immediately think of Marcus Aurelius. I'm not saying he did it perfectly, but he absolutely was a model example of how to try and apply these principles. So
I think the other example they're sort of going full circle back to is to Polemarchus's father, Cephalus, who right at the very beginning was talking about his meaning to life, which was that, and for him, I think what justice was as well, which was leaving life with, I think, like a clean slate in the sense that you'd lived a good life and hadn't wronged any other people and had tried to
done
be
the right thing.
Yeah, try to be honest in your dealings. And if I've done that, then I can sleep easy at night. And for me, that's enough. And
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
brilliant.
interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, very good.
But it's still not the ultimate goal, right? Like it's like Socrates is like, yeah, that's a pretty good achievement, but it's not the best achievement.
Yeah,
Or is he kind of saying, yeah, that is great. Oh, I'm probably saying the same thing, but
Yeah, he
saying, yeah,
is.
that's great, but wouldn't it could be even better, if
Yeah,
the whole society was geared towards allowing this person to actually make that difference.
for sure. And that's where their perfect state, makes sense, and you can see why he's structuring the state so specifically
So
about
rigidly,
how he
yeah.
wants this to be, because it's this society where you can have these guardians who are philosopher warriors who aren't going to be tempted away from the right pathway by riches or wealth or trying to one up all the men around them. They're going to be pure of thought and soul and be able to really be true philosophers, and that's what he wants, right? I mean, it's a bit self-serving because really he wants to design this whole society to put philosophers in the prime sort of seat, if you know what I mean.
I
But for
think,
the
yeah,
betterment
I
of
think,
mankind, in his view, right?
yeah, that's what I mean when I said earlier. That's this sort of the uncharitable reading of it. But I think if you combine that with the fact that Socrates is always doing this whole, you know, I'm the man that knows nothing. I'm the one that's
Hmm.
always. It comes across as kind of disingenuous because he sets up these arguments and he goes step by step to get them where he wants, but he's also sort of constantly saying, "Well, I don't know the answer to this. Let's think it through." So maybe he's not envisaging himself in that position.
I don't think he necessarily puts himself in it, but he puts people. I guess could Socrates be a guardian? Probably not, because he doesn't have the balance. He doesn't have the
And he doesn't have
balance, right?
and he doesn't have shoes.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
but I think history shows he had opportunities to try and take over, and he wouldn't. He didn't want to play in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well let's move on to. Oh, sorry, I'm happy to move on to the next bit.
Yeah, let's move on.
All right,
That's
cool.
cool.
Well, it's kind of the next bit, but it's not. But anyway, so once they say yes, that would be a great work, but there's a greater work exists. Let's continue. So the causes why philosophy is in such an evil name have now been sufficiently explained. The injustice of the charges against her has been shown. Is there anything more which you wish to say? Nothing more on that subject, he replied, but I should like to know which of the governments now existing is in your opinion the one adapted to her. Not any of them, I said, and that is precisely the accusation which I bring against them. Not one of them is worthy of the philosophic nature, and hence that nature is warped and estranged as the exotic seed which is sown in a foreign land becomes denaturalized and is wont to be overpowered and to lose itself in the new soil. Even so, this growth of philosophy, instead of persisting, degenerates and receives another character. But if philosophy ever finds in the state that perfection which she herself is, then will be seen that she is in truth divine, and that all other things, whether nature of men or institutions, are but human. And now I know that you are going to ask what that state is. So they're saying, where can this happen? Where can this philosopher be in charge in the current governments that exist? And he's like, that's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he did say there was one big change he had to make in order to fix everything. Overthrow the government and install a philosopher king.
So we'll have to see what the response to that is next week, I think.
Correct. And given how much time we've thrown into that one, I think we will avoid the pub philosophers tonight. And I think we'll call it a night because that was a chunky episode, and I really enjoyed it. And time flew. I can't believe how quickly that went.
Yeah, right on, boys. It was good fun.
So, look, for those listening, thanks for joining us. Remember remember, the Republic wasn't built in a day, and neither are middle-aged men. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time. See you later.
Bye.
Yeah.